More than 4 billion years ago, our universe came into being. Human history is only a fraction of that time, and in this short span of time, we have come a long way in understanding our universe as we navigate from countless galaxies to the smallest of quantum particles. The more we explore the building blocks of our universe, the more we are surprised. There seems to be more questions than answers. In spite of all the advances in science and technology, we still cannot answer some basic questions. Why are we here? What caused the Big Bang? What existed before the Big Bang? What is the origin of life? Are we a result of evolution? And the most fundamental and intriguing question of all, does God exist? Let us take a look at some of the most advanced theories and scientific facts and try to see if we can answer that question.
Let us begin our journey and take a look at some of the most advanced theories that shapes our belief system.
In his highly successful theory of general relativity, Einstein tells us that energy equals mass, and mass warps space-time. Remember the physics analogy of the trampoline with a bowling ball in the middle? Like that ball, which gently distorts the trampoline's canvas, the sun warps the smooth canvas of space-time, enough to make planets move in curved orbits. A whole galaxy warps space-time much more. The more massive the body, the more warping. But if we could zoom in on the quantum realm, we wouldn't see a smooth expanse of canvas gently distorted by massive bodies. We'd see quantum foam. Quantum gravity models predict that space-time is a seething foam of tiny regions where minuscule new dimensions unfurl and then furl back in on themselves, spontaneously appearing and disappearing with inconceivable quickness. These regions blink in and out of existence like the bubbles in the foam of a freshly poured beer. There's no such thing as empty space. There is only quantum foam everywhere. Such is space-time for a quantum physicist.
For the past 40 years, astronomers have known that something about the cosmos doesn't add up. First in galaxy clusters, and then within individual galaxies, they found that visible matter, stars, gas, and dust, cannot account for the motions they observe. No one knows what this missing mass, now called dark matter, actually is. But studies by NASA's WMAP spacecraft of the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe, show how much is out there. Dark matter outnumbers ordinary matter by 4 to 1.
Hello and welcome to the HubbleCast. Now, in its very early years, the universe was extremely smooth and uniform. There were no stars and no galaxies, and all of the matter was distributed throughout the universe very, very evenly. Almost perfectly so. But not quite. Even back then, there were tiny variations in the density from place to place. And over time, these tiny fluctuations grew and condensed into a web-like pattern that pervades and gives structure to the universe of today. Formed of vast filaments and sheets of dark matter, this structure is known to astronomers as the cosmic web. Now the trouble is, because it's made of dark matter, you can't actually see it when you look up into the sky. You can model it with computer simulations, but until very recently, it had only ever been observed indirectly.
Astronomers have mapped a giant structure made of dark matter. It extends almost 60 million light-years out from a huge galaxy cluster and is our best glimpse so far of the scaffolding that gives the universe its large-scale structure.
One day, we will resolve the mysteries of the dark matter. But does that make us any closer in understanding why are we here, or does God exist?
As they try to unravel the mysteries of the universe, scientists are coming to an astounding conclusion. To make sense of outer space, they need to understand inner space, the microscopic matter that forms the foundation of everything we see. But shrinking down billions of times into the realm of atoms and subatomic particles takes us into a strange, unexplored world.
Where's the weird, you ask? Once you get past existence coming and going, and virtual particles, and uncertainty, and exclusion, most of the weird stuff in quantum physics comes from what is known as entanglement, and subsequently wave function collapse. When two or more particles interact, their wave function becomes entangled in such a way that some properties of each are now depending on what happens to the other particle. Then these particles can be carefully separated while in careful isolation to distant locations. But as long as they're not disturbed, they are still entangled and still have properties dependent on each other. Then, when one particle is examined to see what the individual property might be, the wave function instantly disentangles. Physicists would say this wave function collapses. Instantly, the other particle has its codependent properties disentangled and determined. Here is an example. We can set up a source to emit electrons in pairs, with their spins dependent on and opposite from one another. Now, neither electron knows what spin state it is in. Both are flip-flopping back and forth between spin up and spin down. But their wave functions are entangled, so that whenever one of the electrons is disturbed and settles into one of the spin states, say spin up, the other electron instantly settles into spin down state. And this instantly occurring collapse happens whether the electrons are next to each other or on the opposite side of the planet. And while some of that is truly weird, a host of modern technologies are beginning to rely heavily on this weirdness.
That means if a scientist observes one entangled particle and forces it to spin clockwise, the other entangled particle will immediately start spinning in the opposite direction. That seems intriguing, but it's hardly earth-shattering until you consider that the two entangled particles can be separated by billions of light years. And still, the moment you observe one particle spin, you've dictated the other particle's spin.
That's weird, because it may suggest that information has traveled instantaneously, faster than the speed of light, from one particle to another. I don't understand it. I don't know that anyone does. Spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it.
One day, we may uncover the secrets of quantum entanglement, or understand how particles behave like waves. But does that answer the questions, why are we here? Or does God exist?
String theory, what is it? Well, it's a theory that tries to answer the question, what are the basic, fundamental, indivisible, uncuttable constituents making up everything in the world around us? The idea is like this. So imagine we look at a familiar object, just a candle and a holder, and imagine that we want to figure out what it is made of. So we go on a journey deep inside the object and examine the constituents. So deep inside, we all know you go sufficiently far down, you have atoms. We also all know that atoms are not the end of the story. They have little electrons that swarm around the central nucleus with neutrons and protons. Even the neutrons and protons have smaller particles inside of them, known as quarks. That is where conventional ideas stop. Here is the new idea of string theory. Deep inside any of these particles, there is something else. The something else is this dancing filament of energy. It looks like a vibrating string. That's where the idea of string theory comes from. And just like the vibrating strings that you just saw on a cello can vibrate in different patterns, these can also vibrate in different patterns. They don't produce different musical notes, rather they produce the different particles making up the world around us. So these ideas are correct. This is what the ultra-microscopic landscape of the universe looks like. It's built up of a huge number of these little tiny filaments of vibrating energy, vibrating in different frequencies. The different frequencies produce the different particles. The different particles are responsible for all the richness in the world around us. And there you see unification, because matter particles, electrons and quarks, radiation particles, photons, gravitons, are all built up from one entity. So matter and the forces of nature all are put together under the rubric of vibrating strings, and that's what we mean by a unified theory. When we look around the world, as scientists have done for the last 100 years, there appear to be about 20 numbers that really describe our universe. These are numbers like the mass of the particles like electrons and quarks, the strength of gravity, the strength of the electromagnetic force, a list of about 20 numbers that have been measured with incredible precision, but nobody has an explanation for why the numbers have the particular values that they do. Now, does string theory often answer? Not yet, but we believe the answer for why those numbers have the values they do may rely on the form of the extra dimensions. And the wonderful thing is, if those numbers had any other values than the known ones, the universe as we know it wouldn't exist. This is a deep question. Why are those numbers so finely tuned to allow stars to shine and planets to form, when we recognize that if you fiddle with those numbers, if I had 20 dials up here and I let you come up and fiddle with those numbers, almost any fiddling makes the universe disappear. So can we explain those 20 numbers?
If we could only master the rhythms of strings, then we'd stand a good chance of explaining all the matter and all the forces of nature. From the tiniest subatomic particles to the galaxies of outer space. This is the potential of string theory to be a unified theory of everything.
One day, we may be able to make the connection between the quantum world and the galactic world. But does that still answer the question, why are we here? Or does God exist? Now, let us try to take a look at these questions from a very different perspective. Let us look at the evolution theory.
This theory holds that the species on Earth were not created by God, but came into being as a result of processes governed entirely by chance. The founder of this theory was an amateur naturalist named Charles Darwin. Darwin expounded this theory in his book, The Origin of Species, which was published in 1859. Darwin proposed that all species evolved successively from a common ancestor. But how did that first living thing come into being? Darwin did not address this question at all in his book. He was not even aware that this point was one of the biggest refutations of his theory. The primitive understanding of science in his day assumed that life had a very simple structure. According to a theory called spontaneous generation, which was popular since the medieval age, it was believed that living things could easily arise from non-living matter. It was commonly thought that frogs spontaneously arose from mud, and bugs from food leftovers. And some curious experiments were designed to prove these theories. The theory argues that first, the unicellular living beings were formed, which then in hundreds of millions of years turned into marine invertebrates and fish, respectively. These fish later had supposedly emerged onto land and turned into reptiles. The story goes further and says that birds and mammals evolved from reptiles. For this claim to be true, there ought to have been numerous intermediary species, linking one living species to another. For instance, if reptiles truly had evolved into birds, then countless half-bird, half-reptile creatures ought to have lived at one time or another. And these intermediary creatures ought to have incomplete, half-developed organs. Darwin called these hypothetical creatures transitional forms. He knew that in order to support his theory, the remains of such intermediate forms had to be found in the fossil record. And the origin of species, he wrote, "If my theory be true, numberless intermediate varietals linking most closely all the species of the same group together must assuredly have existed. Consequently, evidence of their former existence could be found only amongst fossil remains." However, Darwin was aware that the fossil record did not contain any of these hypothetical intermediate forms. This is why he devoted a special chapter to this in his book and posed these troubled questions. Why, if species have descended from other species by fine gradations, do we not everywhere see innumerable transitional forms? But as by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the Earth? Darwin had supposed that such transitional forms would be discovered when the fossil record was inspected more carefully. Subsequently, evolutionists that followed him examined geological layers all around the world for 140 years and looked for these missing fossils. All these efforts ended with great despair. The transitional forms imagined by Darwin remained just that, figments of imagination. English paleontologist Derek Ager admits this fact, though he is an evolutionist. The point emerges that if we examine the fossil record in detail, whether at the level of orders or of species, we find over and over again, not gradual evolution, but the sudden explosion of one group at the expense of another. The oldest stratum of the Earth in which fossils of living creatures have been found is that of the Cambrian, which has an estimated age of 500 to 530 million years. In strata older than the Cambrian, no fossils of any creatures except a few unicellular organisms are to be seen. In the Cambrian period, however, many diverse species appear quite abruptly. More than 30 invertebrate species, such as jellyfish, starfish, trilobites, and snails emerge all of a sudden. These living beings have complex body systems, such as the circulatory system, and also very complex organs. For instance, the eye of the trilobite is made of hundreds of honeycomb-like cells, each having a double lens system. It is a wonder of design. This is the first eye that appeared on the Earth, and it definitely refutes the Darwinist claim that life evolved from the very primitive towards the complex. Moreover, the honeycomb eye structure of trilobites has survived since 530 million years without a single change. Modern insects such as bees and dragonflies have the same eye structure as did the trilobite. According to the theory of evolution, species must have evolved from pre-existing forms. However, there is no other complex life form known to have existed before the trilobites and other species of the Cambrian period. The Cambrian species came into existence all of a sudden, without any ancestors.
After looking at all these advanced theories, the question is, are we any closer in answering the question, why are we here? Or does God exist? Maybe science can't answer that question. Maybe it's not meant to be answered using science. From looking at the complexities of this vast universe and the complexities of the quantum particles, one cannot say that the creation was a spontaneous accident, but rather a well-designed machine created by a very intelligent designer, whom we refer to sometimes as Mother Nature or God.
وكانتا رتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون.
Have those who disbelieved not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joined entity, and we separated them and made from water every living thing? Then will they not believe?
وجعلنا في الأرض رواسي أن تميد بهم وجعلنا فيها فجاجا سبلا لعلهم يهتدون.
And we placed within the earth firmly set mountains, lest it should shift with them, and we made therein mountain passes as roads that they might be guided.
وجعلنا السماء سقفا محفوظا وهم عن آياتها معرضون.
And we made the sky a protected ceiling, but they from its signs are turning away.
وهو الذي خلق الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر كل في فلك يسبحون.
And it is He who created the night and the day and the sun and the moon. All heavenly bodies in an orbit are swimming.
وما جعلنا لبشر من قبلك الخلد أفإن مت فهم الخالدون.
And we did not grant to any man before you eternity on earth. So if you die, would they be eternal?
كل نفس ذائقة الموت ونبلوكم بالشر والخير فتنة